Right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this sharing session about resilience in difficult times. We wanted to share with you some insights about how the publishers in the Asia Pacific region are dealing with the crisis and what kind of effect the crisis has on their business. So we're very happy to have with us here today Kevin Chapman from Upstart Press in New Zealand, and Nathan Hollier from Melbourne University Press in Australia, Adi from Gramedia Digital, and Kartika VK from India from Westland Publishers. Thank you very much for taking the time for being with us today and sharing your insights and your knowledge. And I would like to start with Kevin to tell us a bit about what's happening in New Zealand and how the crisis has affected the publishing in New Zealand and his business. And I would also ask Kevin to say a few words about himself. Thank you.
Good evening from New Zealand. You want your little intro, Claudia. So I'm an independent trade publisher who has spent most of the last far too many years working for large publishers around the world. And I ran Hachette New Zealand for a long time. Before that, I worked in Canada and the UK and briefly in Melbourne. So COVID. In New Zealand, this started for most of us in late March, as in many other places, when New Zealand went into what we called stage 4 lockdown. And essentially that meant that the entire economy halted apart from essential business. So publishers and booksellers could not operate. And for pretty much 7 weeks, there were no booksellers open. There was no publishers. Publishers weren't doing business. And in the first quarter of the year, of the 12 weeks in the first quarter of the financial year, we lost 7 weeks business. The really interesting part about that was when we came out of lockdown, the world went mad. In the 5 weeks left in that quarter, we achieved almost our entire budget for the quarter. We were 13% down on budget. Upstart Press operates a distribution business for 11 other publishers, most of the university presses in New Zealand and some other local publishers. And across the board, we saw this massive explosion of demand. I worked in the warehouse during that time, as well as all the normal publishing things one does, commissioning and marketing, and I was picking backlist titles from the shelving that I had not picked in the previous 5 years, that I'd never seen in the previous 5 years. So there was this deep interest right through the market. We all thought that would ease off. But it continued as we went down our alert levels to level 1, which in New Zealand is essentially normal life, apart from the fact that you don't have incoming people from overseas and you don't get on a plane and go overseas. So we had 45,000 people at rugby matches. We had no social distancing. And we've had that for most of the time since June, apart from a short period where we had another outbreak in Auckland in August. We've been waiting for that demand to drop off, but it simply hasn't dropped off. I was at my warehouse today, and it is still going mad, supplying booksellers with books from across us and our third-party publishers. The mix, the problem in this mix is logistics. The multinational publishers in New Zealand are all warehoused in Australia. and shipping books from Australia to New Zealand has turned into a nightmare for pretty much everyone. Last year, most of those books were air freighted. There are simply not enough planes traveling between Australia and New Zealand now to get enough air freight. So everything was coming by sea freight. Then the Australian wharves decided to have industrial action, and it turned into a major mess. So I've been on tour last week with an author in the South Island, and I had booksellers saying normally I'd have 15 or 20 boxes coming in every day. Now I get nothing for 3 weeks, and then I get 3 pallets. And you can imagine what that's like for a very small bookstore. It's impacted on us as a publisher in that we have a book that was #1 in New Zealand for 4 weeks and then went out of stock, and our reprint from China was first impacted by passing through Australia on a ship and therefore delayed by industrial action, and then because the demand went mad and everybody's trying to import goods into New Zealand to meet the demand, the ports are now overloaded. So a book that I should have been in had a reprint in and been shipping now is currently scheduled to arrive at the end of next week in New Zealand and then sit out off the port for 5 or 6 days waiting for space to unload. So I've lost 3 to 4 weeks of selling time. However, compared to a lot of other industries that have suffered a lot, we are in a really good position, and we appear to have had two really important things. One is that people have reconnected with books through the whole lockdown process, and the second is they appear to have fallen out of love with American and UK internet providers, which we think is a very, very, very good thing. So that's the report from New Zealand.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to hear. Yeah, so let's go over to Australia, to your neighbor, Nathan from Melbourne. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Could you also
Thanks,
say a
Claudia,
few words?
and thanks for that, Kevin. That was interesting. Here, the New Zealand perspective. Here, the COVID crisis kicked in really around the same time as New Zealand, late March, early April, and we saw quite a few publishers laying off staff and holding titles back from release, changing schedules so that they were going to come out late in the year when it was hoped that the crisis was over, and a lot of those are coming out now. So there was a great deal of uncertainty in the industry, which continued for some months after that. And I don't mind admitting that I was asked by my board to provide a worst case scenario, and I looked at 70% drop in retail sales and these kinds of prospects. But nothing like that happened. And Nielsen reports that to the end of October, the Australian book retail market was up over 5% in value and almost 8% in volume. So it's not quite sounding like the situation there in New Zealand, but it has defied expectations. In recent weeks, I've seen reports of at least one publisher reimbursing staff for cuts to their salary that they made during this year. And fiction has performed particularly well during this year. It's often been explained as the customer base turning to some kind of escapism. I don't know whether that's right or not. Fiction actually is not all escapist, and I think other factors might have played a part, such as people just being at home more. But trade non-fiction, which is the category that we mainly publish into at Melbourne Uni Press, that's up slightly on last year, about 3% on volume and 1% on volume, 3% on value. So that's been pretty flat, and it's been specialist, non-fiction, academic titles, textbooks, library titles for higher education library market. Those are the ones that have really suffered here in Australia. And the titles in those categories are down 12.5% in value and nearly 6% in volume, again to the end of October. And the higher education sector here has been really quite heavily hit by the virus. And a lot of courses stopped and students unable to attend. So it's not really surprising that you'd get those sorts of results in that part of the market. It's often been commented that the pandemic has accelerated trends in consumption that were already visible, particularly with online consumption. And that is true in Australia. On big online retailers, Booktopia, which is our main one here, has experienced very strong growth. Amazon Australia has also grown strongly from a pretty low base. And there have been other online retailers which have emerged. And some local bookstores have certainly struggled. The physical bookstores, or bricks and cement bookstores, as we call them in Australia. And it's easy to imagine that those guys with e-commerce systems that aren't as sophisticated, and some of the economy unable to benefit from some of the economies of scale of their larger competitors, and with some relatively higher overheads, that they've faced particular challenges. But I've also had reports of some of those stores doing particularly well, or having a really successful year. So it's not all doom and gloom even there.
Mm-hmm.
The Australian Publishers Association's been active promoting Australian books for export, and there's a hashtag Shop Early, Shop Local campaign going at the moment, which is also proving effective. At MUP, we took a business as usual approach to the extent we were able. And as Kevin touched on, there were delays with printing, especially from China. There were some delays with gaining access to images and archives, these sorts of material that can that go into the producing a book. Some other challenges, but our titles, we kept them coming out, and that's actually worked for us pretty well. We also, here in Victoria, went into a pretty heavy lockdown, a stage 4 lockdown, and only essential workers were allowed to go into the office. But it was a great relief to me that the MUP team was able to do what we needed to do remotely. And our distributor, UBD, they were classified as essential workers, and their warehouse was made COVID safe, with a rigorous system there, and they were able to keep operating. And I must also mention the Australian government introduced a program called JobKeeper, where they paid money to companies which were losing revenue on previous years. If you met certain requirements, we did, and that's made a big difference to both our bottom line and to our business confidence. And again, as Kevin mentioned, it's not as dramatic in Australia, but there are signs that they're coming out of COVID, that there's pent-up demand. Retail market overall across industries has really taken a hit, of course, as so many of them closed down and people are unable to get out. But there are signs now that that consumption is picking up. So here, I think that there is a reasonable degree of optimism within the industry and where we are now.
Wow, that's really good to hear. I mean, even in Germany, we're not suffering as bad as we thought we would, but we're, I think, far away from where you are. That sounds really good, very promising. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us, Nathan.
Pleasure, Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you. And now let's go to Indonesia. As we mentioned, we're working our way backwards, if we want, from one part of the world to the next, to the other, and from the east to the west. So let's go to Indonesia, and let's hear from Adi, who is the CTO, I believe, of Gramedia Digital, but you can say a few words about yourself in a minute. But also I wanted to say it's really interesting that you'll be sharing also information perhaps about digital, because digital is one of the areas that has grown a lot, at least in many countries of this world. So over to you, Adi. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Claudia. So yeah, my name is Adi. I'm from Gramedia Digital. I'm not the CTO, but
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm in charge of the business side of the platform, all the platform, digital platform that Gramedia owns. So yeah, today I'd like to share what we've been doing during this pandemic, because as we know, with the pandemic, so traditionally, Gramedia is a publishing and a retail company. Traditionally, we distribute books that we publish to over 100 Gramedia stores across Indonesia. However, during this pandemic, we can no longer rely on our brick and mortar stores. Since the pandemic started, there has been less traffic in our stores due to the large-scale social restrictions, or what we call here in Indonesia, PSBB, imposed by the government on cities all over Indonesia. Moreover, some of our stores, they had to reduce their operating hours also due to the government regulation. Some even had to close. So it's been a tough time for our store. Their revenue, I think, went down for like 30% this year compared to last year. While it has been a challenging time, it also one that unlocks new opportunities for us. Our digital sales have grown significantly since the pandemic started, almost over 500% compared to last year. We have 4 major digital sales channels. Internally, we have gramedia.com, which is the digital extension of our brick and mortar stores. We also have a Gramedia Digital, which is a platform where our users can browse, buy, download, and read Gramedia ebooks. It's like our Kindle to Amazon. It's like our Kindle. And externally, we sell our products in online marketplaces. Most of our sales came from Shopee and Tokopedia. They're Indonesia's equivalent to Alibaba. Huge sales came from them. We also sell our ebooks in Google Play Books. So the sales from these channels experienced significant increase from those in the previous year. We're integrating our brick and mortar stores with our digital retail to give customers a better shipping rate and a faster delivery. So this is a case where our customers lives in Medan City and North Sumatra on the Sumatra Island. She buys our books either from Gramedia.com or from online marketplaces. Then our system will notify our store in Medan. And after the payment is received, these books will be delivered to customer from our Medan store, which is the store that is the closest to the customer. Therefore, she will get the cheapest shipping rate and also the shortest delivery time. So although Jakarta is the biggest city in Indonesia, not all of our orders are delivered from Jakarta. We deliver it from our store that are closest to our customer. So it's a advantage for us. We can offer a better shipping rate and delivery time. The pandemic also opens a huge opportunity for ebooks, especially in education sector. Students in Indonesia are not allowed to go to school because of the pandemic. The classes are conducted online. It has been difficult for students to access their school's library. They haven't been able to get access to the school's library because schools are closed. So we offer a solution for school by developing a digital library for them, where the students can have access to rent ebooks from there. The pandemic has pushed forward the development of digital infrastructure in a lot of Indonesian households. Now that children, students, they have to have an online class. Therefore, access to ebook is more open in Indonesia now than ever. Ebooks and print on demand play a significant role during the pandemic, not only in generating new streams of revenue, but also in mitigating risks of printing books. This pandemic has pushed us to reevaluate the way we print our books, the way we decide how many copies we are going to print for our books. So we started to do more pre-order to help us decide how many copies we should print for our soon-to-be published titles. We also started to print more conservatively. Even in some cases, if the pre-order data did not show that there was going to be a good demand for the title, we decided to publish the title in ebook first. We didn't publish it in paperback if the pre-order data did not show that there's going to be a good demand for the title. Then if it turns out that the sales of the ebook is good, and there's actually demand for the paperback, then we will utilize our print on demand feature. Again, we'll print it conservatively. And if we see that the paperback demand is still growing while the stock is almost gone, we can utilize our print on demand again. And that way, we will always be able to fulfill the demand of our books, even if we do not print the way we printed our books in the past. We haven't done anything fancy in regard to machine learning or data analytics, but we started to try to utilize data that we have to create more effective marketing activities, as well as to choose which books we need to highlight, reprint, or to have in our stock. During this pandemic, we've done a lot of webinars through Instagram Live or Zoom, like what we're doing now. We looked at our user database before we did some of these webinars to find the themes or topics for the webinars, and also to find users that we could target to become the participants of the webinars. Some of these webinars are free, some of them are paid. In the case of paid webinars, this data utilization process has helped us generating ticket sales. And for the free ones, we usually offered related books. We sold those related books in the middle of the webinar or in the end to the participants. And this data utilization process has helped us improve conversion rate from our webinars. Moreover, besides taking a look at our own data, we found that it's also helpful to regularly check what books are trending or popular in the online marketplaces. And we make sure that we have those books in stock. So this marketplaces algorithm has also helped us to decide which books we have to have in stock. We've also moved beyond books. So we made our first film last year, but this year that film was selected to compete in Sundance Film Festival back in February. And this year we've also we're currently in the pre-production phase of our next film project. Our first film was based on a award-winning author in Indonesia. His name is Eka Kurniawan. So it was based on his short story. While our current film project that is currently in pre-production phase, the story will also be published in our writing platform. So we have our Wattpad-like platform. It's called Gramedia Writing Project. So the story of our next film will be published in that platform. We've also started to produce more online master classes that are also based on our books that we publish. And interestingly, this year we've sold more audio-visual rights and options of our books to production houses, OTTs, film investors. I think the amount that we've sold this year already bigger than the amount that we sold in the previous years. So in the content side of the business, this year has been good for us. I think that's all I can share from Indonesia. Claudia, I think you're in mute, Claudia.
Sorry for that. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That was a really interesting insight. Yeah, and schools are closed until further notice or until the end of the year. That's really tough. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And let's move further west. So we are really excited to have with us the only woman, no, the other woman in this panel, Kartika VK from Westland Publishers. Westland, yeah. Please share some information about the Indian market and also a few words about yourself and what you do at Westland. Thank you.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. So, yeah, okay. So I'm with Westland, which is a publisher that does trade books. So your stories are all, I suppose, very different from mine. The story of Indian publishing during the pandemic is not at all as positive and optimistic as it obviously is for a lot of the world. We have had a really bad time during this year, as in 3 months. March, April, May were more or less wiped out because there was a lockdown that kept extending across the country. So there was delivery of only essentials, and books were clearly not essentials for our government. So there was no way for even the online platforms to deliver books. The bookstores were all shut. So what happened was that practically everybody across India, all the publishers, did not publish anything between, say, mid-March and the end of June or mid-June. So 1/3 of your publishing basically stalled. And then, of course, when we started up in end June, we started up getting our feet in a little slowly to see whether there was actually going to be a market and how to get the books there, because by now books were considered all right to deliver, but lots and lots of places in India were locked down. So there were hotspots where they would say no delivery. So this PIN code is not acceptable for delivery. And that was also then a matter of great chaos, because when you ordered a book online, for instance, the PIN code would show delivery all right. But by the time you got to deliver that day, they might have locked it all down. So books were being returned, returns were happening all over the place, or orders were just not being processed. So that was the online story for a while. It's cleared up now. It's much, much better in an organized space now. Bookstores had a really bad time because they had to shut down. There was no way. And the smaller indie stores obviously worried about, paying rent without any income, paying staff without any income. So we've heard stories about a lot of people who've had to let people go quietly, maybe. In some places it's been public. People have had to take cuts in salary. And I recently discovered, well, last week, that colleagues in various publishing houses had been taking salary cuts, are still taking salary cuts, sometimes as much as 40 to 50% of their basic pay. So it's not been very easy. I guess there are multiple stories here. There are people like me who work for a company that is international, and therefore, they are owned by Amazon. So we continue to be solvent. There are the big publishing houses like Penguin and Harper, who obviously have a different scale of work, and they continue to do fine. And then there are the smaller independent presses from whom we hear they're afloat but with difficulty and don't know whether they will be able to get back into shape really at the end of all this. There are people who are talking about shutting down. There are bookstores that have shut down, and there are indie presses talking about not publishing at all this year. So I know, for instance, of a publisher who's done no publishing from March till he said not in December either. So they're just going to ride it, just going to wait. They've told their people that they cannot pay them till it's over. So there is, of course, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but our economy is in a shambles anyway in India at the moment. We're in really bad shape. We were trying to get back into shape before the pandemic with lots of, there were sales tax, GST issues that were trying to be sorted out by the publishing associations. There was something like an 18% GST added to our ebooks, which was making things untenable, which had been reduced to 12% just before the pandemic. But now we're all trying to recover from such bigger problems that those things have taken the backseat for now. So when the pandemic lockdown got over, the bookstores began to open, people started to deliver copies. Then the bookstores decided that since footfall is still very low and people are, I mean, the cases are really high in India at the moment. Mortality is low, but the hospitals are full. And every day, like in Delhi where I am, every day the newspaper tells me 4,000 new cases. This week, something like 400 people died. So in the middle of all of that, booksellers having to open their stores and get copies to their customers has been a big challenge. Several of them turned to delivery services and to get to that as direct to customer sales. But what happened with that was if a book is, priced at X, the delivery charge was X as well. So the customer was ending up paying twice as much for the book, which didn't work. If the bookseller tried to absorb that cost, then their margins were, ridiculously wiped out. So that wasn't an answer either. So some of them have hit middle ground. They've said, okay, you place a minimum order of X, Y, Z, and we will deliver it for this much, and that's all right. And there are, of course, hardcore readers who are taking that up. But otherwise, the bookstores that were particularly in large malls, for instance, they took much longer to open because public places were closed longer, whereas the small indie stores in the neighborhood market were allowed to function. Or stores selling educational books and textbooks were allowed to stay open. So it's been difficulties at multiple levels. Some people are making good in the process, and there have been increases in digital and ebook sales. So there has been a focus on digitization for smaller publishers and for especially the textbook publishers who are doing well. But we've seen that once the 3-month lockdown was over, then it's not as though the spike we saw in ebooks has sustained. People have dropped off into not quite the same level as before, but it's plateaued now. So we're not really looking at that continuing to be like a big trend, I think, for the rest of the year or whatever happens next. We're still seeing people preferring the physical book if it's available. But the problem in India, and I don't know if this is true of the rest of your markets, but the cell phone is in everybody's hand. The mobile phone is so easily available and is just available to everyone, whether you're in a village or whether you're doing a job that doesn't pay you very much, or you've got a lot of money, but you've all got a mobile phone, and downloading is really easy. Videos are free for the most part. Movies are being watched. All the streaming services are available. So for a fraction of the cost that it takes to buy a book, people can sit wherever they are and watch like 5 movies or whatever. So there is no real movement towards books that we're seeing. I mean, I read that in the US and the UK, fiction sales have shot up dramatically, 50%. You spoke about it as well. We're not seeing any such turning towards books for comfort or solace, or, you're at home, so you read more. That isn't happening. More Netflix is happening, more Amazon Prime, more Hotstar, more, all of those streaming services are benefiting, but not really books, except I think in 1 or 2 categories. And one of the major categories is self-help. Everybody obviously wants to kind of survive, cope, do better if possible. So we're seeing all the gurus in town doing really well. I mean, if they're telling you about life or death or yoga or, I don't know, just like how to get through the day, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of copies selling of those, men mostly. We're seeing progress in the segment of business a little bit. I mean, people talking about things like how to make it despite the problems of the pandemic, or how to kind of start working out of home or doing business at home. So it's clearly about this time and how to get past this time. That seems to be where the books are moving as well. Celebrity-led books are getting a lot of attention. So people, all the main publishers are trying to sign on everybody who's a star and an influencer on Instagram and on, you know, other sort of platforms where that audience will then move to buying their book when it's published. That seems to be like the clearest trend of going younger, more glamorous, celebrity-led sort of buying or selling of books is happening. But the suffering segment is clearly literary fiction, experimental writing, the narrative writing that we all would like to support and see growing bigger and bigger. That's just going down. Fiction is going down. The numbers are sometimes 1/3 or half of what that same writer may have sold 2 years ago, a year ago. So it's like a continuing trend that had already started before the pandemic, and now it's just established it. We don't see why people don't want to escape into fiction at this time, but we realize that if they want to escape, they're going to K-dramas on Netflix and not to Indian writers writing Indian fiction. So we're all learning to speak Korean and doing things which are completely alien to our normal lives because we can't go anywhere. We don't have other entertainment, but we do have the screen, which has become much bigger than the book in India for sure. So again, I mean, places like Netflix and Prime especially are a very small percentage of that. We're talking about, like, a friend in a small town told me the other day that she stopped her the auto rickshaw, that the public transport. She got off because this guy said, I just need like 5 minutes. He ran into the shop, which was selling cigarettes and, you know, roadside. And he gave his phone to the guy there, and the guy downloaded a movie for him. And he gave him like 10 rupees, which is very little. And he ran back to the auto and he said, that's my evening. So that's the sort of spread of mobile communication and data that has happened, which I think is a big factor, apart from all the other stress of no bookstores, no ability to market. We're all doing events online, but it doesn't convert into sales in the same way because people want copies signed by the author. They want to meet the author. They don't really want to just get on and watch them on, you know, screen. So all of this is happening at the same time. We can't say that books aren't selling because as a company, and I'm sure many other companies have also grown year on year, as we have compared to last year, even with these 3 months down. But I think that's more a factor of each individual company's, the base from which they've started and the way they are growing. And we're seeing textbook publishers struggling because schools are all shut, and I don't think they'll open till next year. They've been shut from February. So their classes are all online, and the textbook market obviously is suffering because kids don't really need those supplementary readings and those books anymore. The teachers are making videos for them, trying to help them online. So the book market, the physical book market there has also obviously suffered for that reason. And we have no visibility on when this will pass. I can see that normalcy has returned to a lot of other countries, but India is still looking for, I mean, help. We don't know what to do. It's continuing to be an issue for public health. And until the vaccine actually, I think, comes around and helps people get out to normalcy, offices are going to remain closed for a lot of us. And markets are not going to improve that easily. So I'm the bad news person on this panel at the moment. Thank you, Claudia. That's really what I want to say.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this with us, Kartika. Yeah, we really hope that the vaccine is coming soon, as you probably know, and our speaker from Germany has been recorded, so we will add that bit to this session. But we're not doing so bad in Germany. Some publishers are actually making more profit than last year. And of course, some are not. Bookshops have been very, very creative about selling books during the lockdown, and the lockdown that is the light lockdown that we are experiencing at the moment. But yes, we also have some quite grave numbers, and despite the lockdown, the numbers has not decreased, which is a bit worrying. But the schools are open, so that's a good thing. So yeah, but there has been a lot of talk about coming vaccination. So let's all hope for the best, that we'll be like New Zealand and Australia soon.
Yeah, I want to move to New Zealand today.
Yes.
I mean, it just sounds so wonderful.
Anyway, we've come to the end of the session. There's so much more to talk about, and I'm sure that we will have another opportunity soon. Hopefully you can also join some of our sessions, networking sessions for tomorrow and the day after. So thank you so much, Adi, Kevin, Nathan, and Kartika for sharing your views and the situation in your countries.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you so much.
It was really good to see everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Take
care.
care.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello and welcome to the session about resilience in the times of pandemic. Today I have with me, hello Zoe, very happy to have you here today. Zoe Beck is a publisher from Germany, but she's not just a publisher, she is also an award-winning author and translator. So she can look at the perspective in Germany from all angles. So Zoe, thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation for publishers in Germany at this time, at this difficult time within the pandemic?
Oh yes, actually it is a difficult time, or rather it has been, especially in March and April, when there was some kind of lockdown, or a so-called lockdown, and all the bookshops were closed. This was the time when publishers were really worried about how it's going to be like in the future for the next few months. And most of us, I think, decided to postpone the publication of many, many books. We did not know what was going to happen with Canada as the guest of honor for the Frankfurt Book Fair. We did not know what to do with the Canadian titles, whether to publish them or whether to maybe do them a year later. So for us, it was a rather difficult time. It was a time of decision-making without knowing anything. And I think it became a little bit better during the summer months. But so from what I heard from other publishers, is that the situation could have been much, much worse, and it was kind of okay-ish the way it is now, even though we still don't know how the whole year is going to look like. But altogether, it could have been worse. It is not ideal, and it hasn't been ideal, but it certainly could have been worse. For us, as a smaller publisher, it was not only sad, but really, really a bad situation that we could not go to all the smaller book fairs all over the country, because they simply did not take place. And going to smaller book fairs means selling, for example, books from our backlist. This simply did not happen this year. We could not, of course, go to the bigger book fairs, to the Frankfurt Book Fair, because it was only a digital kind of meeting. And then, of course, you notice all the things you're missing out, all the things that are usually happening at a book fair like this. And so what we did was we focused on the digital market, for example, on our ebooks. And this is a segment that really did well during this so-called lockdown. I think this is, we did not gain new ebook readers. So even though you would think, okay, there is a pandemic going on and people cannot go shopping and like to stay inside, so they buy an e-reader and suddenly become new digital readers. This has not happened for whatever reason, but those who already like reading ebooks, they bought more ebooks, and I think this is what happened with many readers, that they simply bought more books. But still, it's not that that the German book market like exploded. This certainly did not happen.
Mm-hmm. And your books, your printed books, how did the sales of printed books go up or down?
All I can say is it could be worse, but it could certainly be better. We were lucky that in spring we published 2 books, and the first one already got press coverage before the lockdown. So we were really lucky in that case. And then, of course, there were weeks and months without anything happening in the press. And we could not do anything. We couldn't do any readings. We couldn't do any book presentations. So we were quite nervous about the second title. But then again, we were quite lucky, I have to say that, because press coverage started a few months later in summer. During summer, this book was quite well reviewed in the media. I think because of the topic, because it was about women in an Indian woman in oh my goodness, häusliche Gewalt,
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Oh my goodness. Right, and domestic violence, of course, was a topic during the pandemic, during the lockdown. And so this is why it got press coverage. And so again, we were lucky, and we got okay-ish sales for this book. But as I said, it probably would have been better if the bookshops hadn't been closed for a certain time. But again, it could be worse. It could be much worse.
We heard that the bookshops in Germany were praised quite a bit on different levels. Why is that? Well,
the German, I have to say, the independent German bookshops did was absolutely amazing. I think there was kind of a short period of kind of depressed behavior during the first or maybe the first 2 weeks. But what these bookshop owners did was they were coming up with new ideas, with excellent ideas on how to contact their customers, how to connect with them, how to keep in touch with them. And they said, okay, if you want to buy books, you can still do it. You can just give us a call or order them online, or just send us an email, whatever, and we will come to your address, to your house, by bike, by whatever, and just leave it in front of your door, and you send us the money, and we trust you, you trust us. And so this is actually what happened. They found new ways of how to deliver books without having to keep the stores open. And at the same time, all those lovely readers, they really wanted to support their local bookstores. And this is why they accepted all these offers. And this is why they even bought more books, and they probably bought books they never would have bought if there hadn't been a pandemic or whatever. So for them, for those independent bookshops with these really wonderful, I mean, it's just very, very small ideas, but it's very little. When I say, well, they decided to deliver books by bike, for example. It's not a groundbreaking idea, but they just signaled that they can do something and they're willing to do something, and they don't just want to sit around and be in a bad mood over this pandemic. And so for them, I think it was the best thing to do, and it was much appreciated. The bigger stores, those that are, for example, located in the shopping malls, for them it was actually, it was a much bigger problem, because people do not want, in these times, they just do not want to enter shopping malls. And then another thing is that these shops are so big, so that the customers don't necessarily have a closer connection with the people working there. Well, it can happen, but it's not. They don't necessarily have regular customers. They sometimes do, but most of the time they don't. And so they could not establish such close contact with their customers, and they really had to close the shops. Because of their locations in the shopping malls.
I see,
so they did not do that as well as the smaller shops. They were more agile. They had more chances to get over this time of this lockdown.
Okay, I see. Thank you. And we also want to know a little bit about what the situation means for you as an author and also translator.
And the thing is, I mean, as a writer, as a translator, you spend lots of time at home anyway. So you are in a more or less constant kind of lockdown situation. You're so used to working from home and to not leaving the house all the time, and not seeing many people. So social distancing is not really anything new for people like us. But what is really hard is that there are no readings. My current book was published in June, and I could hardly do any readings. There were a few readings during August and September, but after that, of course, everything is cancelled. I can't do anything. I can't really communicate with an audience. So this isn't just sad. This is, even for the sales, it's really bad. As a translator, yes, I think all of us translators, we noticed that the publishers have become a little more careful when it comes to buying new books. They simply buy less licenses. Yeah, and again, as a writer, you can feel that there is a certain hesitation from all the publishers to talk about new books, to talk about new contracts. So there is a tendency to be really careful and to really take the time to see how things are developing. And what I heard from, for example, literary agents was that they could hardly sell any new stuff, and that the situation was rather dire for them.
And for your books, were licenses sold to other countries?
To other countries, no. And so when I asked, so what is going on? Isn't there any interest in anything? The answer was, we don't know, because we simply did not meet all these people because the London Book Fair didn't take place. So everybody was waiting for the Frankfurt Book Fair to take place, and then the Frankfurt Book Fair did not take place. And yes, I know you can send all these, you can send all the information via email to your partners in other countries, but it's not the same. Talking about it and making people interested in something, it's different when you meet in person. It is.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we already came to the end of our time.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing this information with us. And hopefully
Thank you
things
for the
will...
invitation.
Thank you for joining. Bye.
Bye.
Mengawali hari dengan informasi terkini, menjadi sumber referensi dan inspirasi di setiap aktivitas. Melalui news video portal, segala informasi dapat disajikan cepat, akurat, dan lengkap. Dengan kekuatan teknologi digital, Medcom.id hadir dengan berita pilihan yang dikemas secara menarik. Medcom.id, digitally inspire people.
Sudah 15 menit, masih kejebak macet.
Tenang, daripada emosi, 15 menit Anda jadi lebih berharga kalau bersama saya.
15 Minutes, setiap Rabu, jam 6 sore lewat 45 menit. Mediaindonesia.com hadir dengan opini cerdas dan narasumber kredibel, mudah diakses, informasi berkualitas ada di genggaman Anda. Klik di browser Anda, www.mediaindonesia.com. Dan temukan pandangan berbeda, karena fakta bisa sama, sudut pandang boleh beda. Mediaindonesia.com, views and news.
Dalam setiap denyut kota, saya selalu menjadi saksinya. Disiarkan lebih dari 20 televisi jaringan Jawa Pos Group. Jawa Pos TV, paling Indonesia. Kebebasan pers dan gelombang era digital menghadirkan ribuan bahkan jutaan informasi dan data setiap harinya. Beragam data dan informasi berserak di berbagai tempat seiring dengan perubahan dunia yang bergerak begitu cepat. Media-media baru pun bermunculan, namun kualitas informasi seolah tak lagi menjadi prioritas. Bahkan, tak sedikit yang abai pada etika jurnalisme. Untuk menjawab tantangan itu, Kata Data hadir sejak April 2012 sebagai portal media di bidang ekonomi dan bisnis. Beragam sektor diulas mulai dari finansial, energi, pangan, hingga industri kreatif dan digital. Artikel mendalam dan komprehensif dengan sajian infografik yang menarik menjadi karakter utama dari Kata Data. Kata Data berikhtiar untuk terus menyajikan beragam informasi berkualitas untuk kemajuan negeri dan untuk kepentingan bisnis Anda. Kami percaya demokrasi yang sehat tumbuh dari kehadiran informasi dan data yang akurat.
Kalau bicara pakai data.
Hidup terlalu pendek untuk membiarkan pemikiran-pemikiranmu, ide-idemu terdiam begitu saja. Untuk berubah, kita perlu melangkah. Dan langkah itu lahir dari sebuah inspirasi. Republika, start moving.